Hi, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I don't know why I'm more nervous online than in front of a room. Why should Scotland adopt this law? Well, I have to go back to why Ireland adopted the law. In 2010, there was a report done here, a research project into what the sex trade was in Ireland, what was going on, what was happening, and the results of that were astonishing. That most of the women were trafficked, the organised gangs and crimes, and that most of the women were migrant women. At the same time, Sweden's 10-year report was published and showed such positive results. There had been a number of people here campaigning for a change in prostitution law for some time, but it was really those two pieces of work that progressed us to the next stage, and a campaign called Turn Off the Red Light was launched. In 2010 was the year I exited prostitution, and was looking for somewhere to place what I had experienced. Although I had left prostitution, and that was with the support of a social worker. I didn't just have an epiphany. I literally, she took hold of me, and she's the reason I got out. But there was nothing. I was in street prostitution for almost 6 years. And there's a reason why I stayed on the street. One, I felt it was safer in the sense that I could run. And two, staying on the street kept me away from, as much as possible, away from pimps and being under that sort of control, because they have conditions with regards if you sign up on sites and stuff. And I just felt, as bad as my life was, it would be 100 times worse if I was fully under their control. That said, in some way, I had a drug addicted partner, and as did many of my friends on the street, and our pimps often come in the form of drug addicted partners. But in those 6 years, there was nothing I experienced nor witnessed that I could find a justification for. The violence is just horrific. So my time was 6 years, okay? And in those 6 years, I experienced a gang rape with my friend. She didn't survive. She died of an overdose a short time later. I had 3 other rapes, countless humiliations and physical violence, and being spat on, and etc. 6 years. There is no other industry or place of work where we would tolerate that level of violence, and yet it happens. It can never be made safe. And like Diane has previously said, because you'll always be on your own with whoever has bought you, and it is up to them and only them how things are going to play out. So it can never be made safe. But also what happens, it can be quite hard to explain that very often buyers, that when they buy you, they haven't initially thought maybe they would be violent, but what happens is, and this is important, is that when they buy you and they pay you, So they consider that they have paid good money for this service, okay? And maybe it's not going quite as they like, or you're not doing or complying as they like. And you know, it's like when you buy something and you take it home and it doesn't work properly. One of the first things you'll do is bang it or shake it. You know, the same principle applies in prostitution. So very often buyers who didn't intend to initially be violent or aggressive towards you, all too often do, because of that principle. So another point I wanted to address was prostitution and sex trafficking. They are intrinsically linked. You have one because of the other. And I witnessed it firsthand for the last 18 months or so of my time. I stood alongside a trafficked woman, and we were very close, although neither of us would have used the term traffic. I wouldn't. But the conditions of her life were so inhumane. She was totally under his control, 10 years under his control when I met her. So she had this twisted sense of loyalty to him. She'd been trafficked out of Africa, and he couldn't stand me being around her or whatever. And I often thought, well, why does he hate me so much? I'm of no threat to him, as I felt. But and then I realized, like, I was a threat, and the threat I was to him, it was the friendship, was the bond, which is why like the biggest threat to him was my humanity to her, and that friendship and that connection. Because traffickers, and you'll see previous speakers have mentioned, and the pop-up brothels and the constant moving around and the no fixed abode, etc., that these women don't get to build up relationships or get to know their area, or you know, so they get entrenched and entrapped even further. So but she eventually got out with the help of some very good people in Ireland, and then I was out at the time as well. So then I was able to be a credible witness for her legal team, which is rare. And but I wanted to make this point, is that although we had arrived at that street through different methods, different ways, different means, it wasn't the logistics, you know, that connect us. What connects us is that we were bought and used and exploited and often beaten or raped by the same group of individuals, and they are the buyers. And you know, a buyer could buy me one week and her a couple of weeks later, and on 2 occasions we were bought together. And that connection can't be broken by anyone at any time, nor in any country. You know, when we say, when we think about the demand, we must tackle demand. It seems like just a word that's out there, but the demand is men. And I know Pierce has spoken about what they say, and you know, because we can continue to blame pimps and traffickers, and yes, when they're caught, may the hands of the law, you know, fall heavy on them. But if you do nothing to stop the cause, which is the demand, the sex buyers, then the traffic will continue and it'll grow. But these are men. You know, I was a drug addicted. I had an emaciated body, and wasn't you know, they buy us when we're sick. They buy us when we're crying. They continue to sexually molest and to have sex with us if there are tears. You know, often our faces are marked, our bodies are marked. They still buy us. So you're not talking about, I just wanted to, I don't fully know how to explain that sometimes, but there are some myths. I think Piers and Diane addressed the underground, the right, it's a fallacy. And I often think, you know, do they think the police are stupid? Like, if the buyers can find them, so can the police. Let me see. It is a system where it's the most inhumane, unequal system where sexual violence and rape thrive. And there is no state, no government that should ever tolerate that. And that is why Ireland, it took us 7 years to change it, to change the law. And we changed the law in March 2017. It was part of a larger scale but we also got a legal definition of consent in that bill, in that act. Part 4 is the criminalising the buyers, decriminalising the women, and that's often people hear decriminalising, and but to me, full decriminalising is the same as legalising. It's just maybe a nicer word for people to hear, but it's the same thing. So we decriminalise the women, we criminalize the buyers, and then support women to exit. Our law is still in its infancy, and really it's only the last 18 months that there has been movement on it. But we have just a review, or a research project has just been published by SERP over here, which is the Sexual Exploitation Research Project. They've just published findings into our law, even though it's so new, but the results are like with Sweden, positive, especially with regards to the police. There has been a major shift from the police in a cultural shift. They now view the women as the more vulnerable. There's very, you know, and they're totally decriminalized. We did keep the brothel keeping law, which often people say they're still criminalizing, but they're anti-pimping laws, and they're necessary for the police to have in order to access apartments or brothels and investigate and have welfare checks on the women. So they will be kept, but it's fully supported by the police because they are seeing the value of it, and they have had quite a few successful operations, and when that's resourced and backed up, they're showing great results. And we have had a number of organized crime gangs linked to prostitution rackets in front of the courts at the end of 2019, and there are more on the way. Our Criminal Assets Bureau are also having good success in the money. Regarding following the money, the police here fully support the law, but there is a recognition that everybody has to be on the same line of thinking. So there is still some awareness and training to happen within the police. With regards to women, and the reports coming back from them is that intelligence and trust and relationships are greatly improving between the police and the women. In fact, women have now begun to report crimes and have had quick and supportive responses from the police, which was what we had hoped. And if I put myself back, if we had the law when I was there, and I often think, and sometimes I get frustrated because I think of all the things that I would have told the police if I wasn't criminalized But back then, I was a criminal. I was part of the criminal system. And when you're part of a criminal system as such, and you're viewed by the outside world as a criminal, then you tend to keep your mouth shut. And that has broke that sort of gap. We have improvements to be made. We have support systems to be set up for the women. We have immigration things to tackle. It's not, but it's, like I say, it's in its infancy, and it's a great step forward for Ireland, especially in regards to gender equality and society in general, because I always think, like, especially in recent years, there's so much about consent and what consent is. And I know previous speakers, and Ruth, you addressed it, that you can give as many lessons in schools and colleges about consent, but as long as it remains legal to buy a woman or drive down a street and pick one out, then the confusion remains, and that confusion, filters through to our homes and our workplaces and society in general. So that confusion, part 4 ended that confusion here, as I hope Scotland will do. So I don't know how long I was speaking for, but I'll just finish now. But it is it's an industry mostly run by criminals who make millions off the backs of the most vulnerable women and girls. Really, it's trading in trauma, and every penny they make comes from the pockets of the sex buying members of the public. And I wanted to stop. And one of the main reasons this law stops in relation to buyers is that they already know, as Pierre said, what they do is not acceptable, etc. So this law, it brings what they do in the dark into who they are in the day. And I spent 6 years with these men. I know them very well. And that's a risk most will not take. So I hope Scotland follows Ireland and Sweden and France, and we fought for freedom. We should have no problem, fighting for the freedom of others. So thank you.